Cox. Just in terms of procedurals, sorry, Councillor Bowden.
My apologies, Chair, I didn't realise you were going to start with procedurals. I was going to ask, as a matter of courtesy, how would you prefer to be addressed? Chair, Chairman, Lewis,
well, just Chair would be good.
Thank you.
And thank you to you, Chris, or Councillor Bowden for your contribution to this committee as well. I'm happy to take over the mantle. Just in terms of the procedurals, we welcome those members of the public and press who are able to watch us and see us here in St Ives, and there may also be councillors watching, and so the meeting is being live streamed, and we also have some of our officers join us by link. I presume their images will flash up before us.
I believe so, yes.
Technology. So the Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its meetings, so you're welcome to take pictures or tweet during the meeting. I just ask everybody turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is in progress. As you can see, and as those people who've been to this location, and thank you to Huntingdonshire District Council, we are socially distancing. So if people put on face masks should they need to get up from their chairs, and that way we're minimising any risks, and then we just deal with issues as we come to them. Because of the nature of the venue, I hope that people are able to hear and see. If anybody does have any problems in hearing any speakers, then please just raise a hand. I think we're going to be moving the microphone around, is that the case? Everyone's built in? Yeah, they're very small.
Yes.
Okay. So everybody's got a mic in front of them when they are ready to speak. And I'll just remind you that the meeting is being recorded. So just as an opener, I pay tribute to all of the work that the committee's been doing in bringing forward schemes. Obviously, there's still a dialogue with the government and MHCLG, which Roger Thompson is leading for us on. So immediate priority is to maximise the number of schemes that we're able to secure. So in addition to the pipeline schemes, we're considering 3 more today. And we do need to follow up in terms of the terms that the government set us in correspondence, including in March, to seek to maximise. And as you'll see, there's the main item when we will discuss that today is the report that Roger Thompson's introducing, which is item 2.2. So we'll have a good opportunity to discuss that. So despite all of the challenges, the officers have put a lot of work in, and you as a committee, and 4 of you have done that, have put a lot of work into bringing forward schemes, and they're really important. Affordable housing is really important. I take interest for rent, but affordable housing of all types is, and it is a challenge for us to win back public government confidence. And so we will continue those dialogues and make sure that the Housing Committee is fully aware of how we're getting on with that. And should we be successful, I would hope that the government would support us in continuing this programme beyond their current deadline of March 2022. So I do hope that as a committee we'll be able to look beyond that period, but our number one priority is to secure as funding as we can for the schemes that are already in the list. And you can see from the schedule attached to that item 2.2 how many that brings and how important that is to so many families in an expensive housing county. So I'll now move on. In terms of the minutes, I think there may be 3 or 4 members present, councillors Steve Allen, Councillor Chris Bowden, Councillor David Ambrose-Smith and Councillor Ryan Fuller, who were present at the last meeting. Are you happy that I sign those minutes? Thank you. And in doing that, I also just want to welcome other members who've joined us, and that's Councillor Batchelor and Councillor so welcome to the new members as well. If we move on, Roger, to the log. Sorry, Councillor Bowden.
Apologies, you missed agenda item 1.2.
Yep.
Where I'd like to give the apologies for Councillor D. Laws, who is the representative from Fenland, and I am her substitute.
I'm very grateful for you, Councillor Bowden. I've got several notes to read out and I missed that. So thank you, Councillor Bowden. So apologies for Councillor D. Laws. And I also bypassed another critical item, which is, does any member here wish to declare any pecuniary or non-statutorily disclosable interests? You can state that should we come across anything during the items. So no interest declared. And I therefore move on to the action log. For those particularly who were here, but others who might have questions, are there any comments from members on the action log from the last meeting? No? Okay. And then I've got two items I'm looking forward. So item 4 and also there are no public questions. So item 1.5, agenda plan for the committee. Are there any questions or comments on the agenda plan? No? And I then move on to item 1.6. Similarly, any comments on the wider forward plan? Okay, thank you. Right, we get into the core business. I think we're getting a link from Noel Godfrey, which is quite suitable in that she leads on technology and connecting Cambridgeshire. So we've taken this item early rather than have Noel waiting on the rest of the business. So I don't know if we can ask Noel Godfrey to introduce this report.
On screen.
If we haven't, so we can come back to Noel later. We'll just have a 1-minute testing intermission on technology.
Hybrid meetings, Chair.
Pardon?
Hybrid meetings.
Yeah, we've moved from, I've got the notes written out as if we were in virtual, and we've moved to actual, and we're now bringing officers in, we hope, from a distance. I mean, it is to the tribute of the County Council how much progress has been made on this programme, and also to an officer team that's developed the partnerships. So the actual contribution from the combined authority is a supporter, not as a core funder.
Good afternoon. Are you able to hear me now?
Prognosis? So it's Jill Crosker, we hope.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Lewis. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you very well.
Thank you. And I apologise. I'm obviously not Jill Crosker. We've got crossed wires. It is Noel Godfrey here.
Okay, well, we're very glad to have you, Noel.
Thank you. And I'm sorry
so if you could introduce the report.
Yeah. So I'll keep it very brief. I know you have a big agenda this afternoon. There's there's two items really here. One is a progress report to let you know what we've been doing in the Connecting Cambridgeshire programme over the last year. And the second one is to explain about the fact that we are in the pilot area for the government's Project Gigabit programme. And as a consequence of that, we won't have the full details of the programme yet, and we're proposing that we bring to the committee in November a refreshed and updated strategy that will take us through to the next 4-year period. In brief, I can tell you in terms of the update report, obviously we during the last year, there's been some considerable COVID challenges. One of the things that we did was we set up the keeping everyone connected element of the programme to make sure that as much as possible, digital infrastructure was there for people who needed it. Obviously, there was a much greater reliance over the last year. And as there's also, as part of that, there was the Digital Technology Grant Scheme, which was very successful. We've also, of course, been continuing with promoting and supporting the digital infrastructure rollout, particularly full fibre. And one thing to note there is that whilst we're slightly behind on the superfast targets, in terms of full fibre, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area now has over 30% full fibre coverage, which has been considerably successful. We've also been rolling out public access Wi-Fi and running the SMART programme as well. I won't elaborate with too many details, as I said, because to keep it short. In terms of the Project Gigabit programme going forward, that the government target is to get over 85% gigabit capable infrastructure going forward. As I said, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have been chosen as one of the pilot areas for that, and we're working with government at the moment. And the intention is that by the end of this year, there will be a procurement that the government will be leading on, but needs our support so that we will be able to reach some of the hardest to reach areas with full fibre coverage, which wouldn't otherwise be covered commercially. The other thing that I should say that as part of the programme that's being supported by the Combined Authority is the support for commercial rollout to make sure that we're smoothing the process, removing barriers, making it easier to roll out, and therefore attracting more commercial investment. And that has also been very successful. We've got a significant number of new infrastructure providers coming into the area, and it's been particularly noticeable that there's been a lot of providers who are saying that they're now going to provide full fibre to the market towns, which is very welcome, and we're expecting that over the next couple of years. As I said, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Right, thank you, Noelle. Any questions on the report that's in front of us? I can't. Oh, Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's a question I think Noelle's familiar with, because she and I have actually spent a little bit of time in the last few months meeting providers. But Huntingdonshire is one of the worst covered for full fibre broadband in the whole county.
Keep going.
I think it's about 5% coverage last time Noelle looked at these figures. And I'm interested in the comment she just made around the market towns, and I will use the town we're sitting in here at the moment as an example of it proving very difficult in that we're just that bit too far away from large population centres for it to have been deemed commercially viable for the full fibre rollout. But with the poorest coverage in the whole county, I'm not sure there is a solution currently on the table for how we can address that. So I'd just be interested, if Noelle doesn't mind, if she could give us an update on which sounded like a development on those new providers perhaps interested in our market towns. We welcome the fact that St Neots is going to be covered as part of Openreach's commercial rollout, but we haven't thus found a workable solution for the likes of St Ives, Huntingdon, Ramsey, for example.
Can you add, Noel, to that opener that you started on market towns and answer Ryan's question?
Yes, absolutely, I can. So as part of the pilot project for, the pilot work for Project Gigabit, one of the things we've done is we've been going back out to the market to understand more about their plans. And that's why I'm saying that there has been more good news on the market towns. It's not just for Huntingdonshire, there are obviously market towns and other areas of Cambridgeshire which are set to benefit as well. What we don't have at the moment is the collated list. But we will expect to have that within the next month or so, and I can certainly give an update. But what we've seen is that there are new providers coming into the marketplace. So it's quite correct that when we originally had the discussion with Openreach and some of the other people like City Fibre, there was, they weren't able to commit to the market towns, but there has been quite a bit of movement. So I can certainly, as soon as that information is available, I can certainly circulate that.
Okay. No, I think it is an issue, and obviously as a combined authority there's been that bigger, wider focus on market towns, and this is quite an obstacle for those towns at the moment. So appreciate that. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder through you, if I may ask Noel, when the report comes to us in November, is it possible to produce maps to show the areas which have not at that stage yet got commercial coverage or superfast broadband, and confirmation of which of those areas are scheduled to get it in 2022? And I hope it will be all of them. And secondly, will it be possible also to be provided with maps about the progression of full fibre deployment, please, which I'm sure we'll all find interesting in November?
So I hope you caught that both on broadband and full fibre, Noel?
Yes,
and mapping?
Certainly I did, and yes, absolutely. That's what we'd like to do. That's what we plan to do.
So we'll have some maps in November?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to just address the fact that the rural communities, which many of us represent, Peterborough is an urbanisation, obviously, and one of the largest urbanisations in the combined authority, but it's surrounded by a lot of rural areas. What hope is there going forward that the rural communities will be catered for? And by that, I don't just mean the villages, I mean the farmsteads and the hamlets.
No?
Yes, and you're quite right that the city centres of Peterborough and incidentally Cambridge tend to be very well covered, but you don't have to go far out of those urban areas, as you say, until there's issues. Obviously, the Superfast programme so far and the full fibre work that's happened to date has covered a number of them, but there's still, as you mentioned, a number of communities that don't have good coverage, and that we will be focusing a bit more on that in terms of the strategy refresh in November, because there are a number of government approved and government backed schemes that will enable that to happen. One is the procurement that we're talking about through Project Gigabit, but the other one is the provision of vouchers. So where people don't have that connectivity, they can actually access government vouchers, which the combined authority has also had a top up approach for. So we will be coming back with that in more detail, and I absolutely agree with you. Those are the areas that do need to be targeted, that wouldn't otherwise be covered commercially.
The question, we missed quite a chunk there. No? Sorry, you missed a chunk of what I was saying. The sound is very poor. You missed a chunk of your answer.
Right, I'm sorry. I'll repeat it then. Sorry if you're going to have to listen to some of it twice. I was saying that I absolutely agree that it is the rural and the areas near the urban centres where we do know that there's still issues. Generally, the urban centres are fairly well covered. Cities like Peterborough, but it is those surrounding areas. Those are the areas that will be targeted by the procurement going forward, but we also have the government-backed voucher scheme that the combined authority has been providing top-up funding for as well. So there are a number of different opportunities where there isn't going to be commercial coverage, where there can be support for coverage. And that is what we want to be clearly identifying by November, so that everybody understands whether they will be part of a procurement, whether they'll be covered commercially, or whether there are opportunities for them to access vouchers.
So if in addition to the mapping, there's an indication, if you like, of the route to market for the rural areas here and there, as well as the market towns, Noel, in November?
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Any more questions? Or Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chair. I'll have one more, if I may, just on mobile and 5G. And again, I'll use a very parochial example, I'm afraid, because we're in St Ives and I'm also a St Ives resident. But the managing director of my council and I, we are both St Ives residents, and we often joke when we try and make a phone call to one another, coverage in St Ives, town centre of all places. And we often joke we're probably better off with a couple of cups and a very long piece of string to maintain that connection. But, you know, joking aside, a lot of people have been working in and around our market towns from home over the last 15, 16, 17 months. And these issues are very real. So I wonder, you know, I've read the update here, but I wonder if there's a more proactive role we can play in increasing the coverage of phone signal. Because what I'm reading here is it very much seems more like an enabling role of trying to almost help mobile phone companies make better planning submissions, how I've read it. So that may be slightly unfair, and I know there is a study coming at the end of June, which I'm sure will be very informative, but is there anything more we could be doing or should be in this space to try and help this, which, frankly, day and age is a problem we shouldn't be having in some of our largest population centres?
So in addition to not having broadband in the town that we're in, we haven't got decent coverage on mobiles as well. So I think there's a fairly direct question there from Ryan, if you could respond. I mean, what should we be doing more?
Thank you. I will try and answer that. I should say I think the audio is particularly poor, and I think I caught the gist of it, but I don't know if you're going to be able to hear me all of the time. But to say on mobile, I completely...
You're fine at the moment.
Okay, that's great. On mobile, I do completely share the frustration. Part of the issue is that we are quite constrained about what activities we can take because there are state aid issues that prevent or mean it's very difficult to intervene in the market. It's subtly different from fibre broadband. So it is very difficult. We do need to keep plugging away at it though. And one of the things that we are investigating in the 5G front is whether we could be doing more in terms of pushing that forward to actually actively ensure that there is better provision. And in particular, looking at 5G, because we do know that without pushing that agenda forward, we know that places like St Ives and other market towns are currently very low down on operators' deployment plans. And what we're trying to do is push it further up. We will continue to do as much as we can on mobile, but we also do, we do have some constraints. We're not able to just do exactly what we want because of the state aid considerations.
Just sort of as a follow-up then, I mean, is there a map of not spots in the market towns as well? Because some of this isn't some of this, Noel, about the existing network, and we're not suddenly getting 5G across all of the market towns?
Yes, it is about both existing and existing 4G coverage and 5G coverage. We do know we have some not spots in the market towns. We've been able to prove that through physical mapping and surveying of the situation. And in that case, and in that situation, we were actually challenging Ofcom, who told us that actually we had very good coverage. And when we did the physical survey, we were able to prove that it wasn't as good as it had been predicted to be. But there is a quite a close link between 4G and 5G. It uses the same equipment. It uses the same infrastructure facilities. So if we're improving one, we tend to be improving the other as we go forward. That's why we link the two together. So we want to make sure that we have 5G deployments as well as improvements in 4G.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay. Well, I'm going to move to the recommendations. So on page 23, that we note the progress of the programme, and we note and endorse the proposal to bring forward a refreshed strategy for approval to the meeting in November. And we've added a couple of extras there. So anything more you want to add before you sign off, Noel?
No, thank you.
Okay, so I'll put those recommendations. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Proposed by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Bowden on this occasion. Sorry, I was looking that way. Can I have those in favour, please? Any against? That's unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, Noel. Have a good afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you.
So I'll move on to item 2.2, and that's being introduced by Roger Thompson. Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking, Michael, come on in a minute. So the Housing and Communities Committee currently receives performance updates on the expenditure and delivery outputs and the status of discussions with MHCLG and every housing committee. This committee is no different from this report forms an update of the report advised previously in March. Quite a bit has happened since. The programme, as people know, but just for those maybe new members, was originally running for 5 years from the 1st of April 2017 to 31st March 2022, with the ambition to deliver a minimum of 2,000 new affordable housing units with £100 million worth of funding under the English deal from the government. MHCLG determined back in early March that the programme in its current form was going to end with effect from the 31st of March 2021, but MHCLG offered a new programme of support for additional affordable housing for the period April 21 to March 22, the current financial year, with conditions that the CPCA had accepted at its previous Housing Committee and Board at the end of March. The CPCA's response to the conditions is listed under section 2.2 in the report. Effectively, those bullet points reference the delivery plan that's been discussed and provisionally agreed with MHCLG, subject to them reporting to the Minister. I'm not going to go through them individually, but the most important one probably is the first bullet point, where CPCA has confirmed that it will invest all returning capital from its portfolio of loans currently granted to local SME developers to recycle that capital and interest into the grant programme for 2021-2022. So the programme will continue to support a mixed portfolio of schemes, including strategic sites and projects brought forward by housing associations, community lands trusts, community housing entities. Just to clarify, the Cambridge City Affordable Housing Programme, which is being monitored by the CPCA, has also ended with effect from 31st March 2021. The CPCA held £9.7 million worth of monies still in relation to that programme, and that has been transferred to Cambridge City. Any further monitoring of that programme will be undertaken direct by MHCLG. In terms of the CPCA's programme on affordable housing delivery, I reference you to Appendix 1. Appendix 1 shows the housing programme that effectively ended as at 31st March 2021. That programme had 37 schemes with allocated funding, totalling 733 housing units. Approximately 266 of those homes have been completed and involved the expenditure of £26.1 million of grant committed to deliver that programme. The affordable housing programme that we've proposed to MHCLG in this new form for the period April 21 to March 2022 is listed in Appendix 2. That appendix is into three parts. The Housing Committee has already approved 15 schemes, which will total 770 units to be supported and financed with £31 million worth of grant funding. Those units have been pre-approved last year by Housing Committee, but have not yet started on site by 31st March 21, so they'll be forming part of the programme for 21-22. We've requested confirmation from MHCLG that they're in agreement for those schemes to proceed and be part of our programme for this year. The MHCLG have indicated that they seem to be supportive of that idea, those 770 units being within our programme for this year. The financial requirement for that is 3.966 million to deliver those schemes. If you add that to the grant sum committed for the programme that ended 31st March 2021, that will mean that the total amount of money being expended on grant will be 57 million at that point. I think committee are aware, but if not, we have received 55 million so far for our programme. So to deliver what the committee has already approved will be £2 million of new money on top of that money already received. There's then a second section in the table in Appendix 2, which has three schemes totaling 419 units, and these are the schemes that committee are hearing later this afternoon for approval. Those three schemes will be at a cost of 6.117 million and will deliver 419 additional units. We understand that MHCLG report the progress of those schemes to committee, to the Minister, and we await to hear what the Minister's response will be to the request for the support for the schemes that committee are hearing today. There's a final section at the bottom of the appendix, 5 further schemes. At this time, MHCLG have said that they're not prepared to recommend that those schemes go forward for approval. But what we've sought to do is to keep a dialogue open on those schemes for the future once the Minister's decision on the existing programme is known, so we can come back to MHCLG and have an active discussion about those schemes that we would still like to see come forward and be delivered, and they're very deliverable in our timescale to March 2022. That is quite a considerable number of units that we're talking about in those 5 schemes, and if we were successful in getting MHCLG's support for those schemes, we will be well over the unit target, having utilised the £100 million for the programme to March 2022. In fact, our total will be somewhere towards 2,460 units if we had that support. So we've made our request to MHCLG. The most recent update in terms of they've confirmed they've presented their report to the Minister. We don't know what their report says, and we now wait the decision from the Minister and from MHCLG. In terms of communicating the opportunity, we continue to have dialogue with all sorts of housing organisations, charities, community housing organisations, developers, registered providers, to look at what other opportunity there may be to capture schemes that would run to March 2022 that we might still have an opportunity to introduce to MHCLG as part of the programme for this year, or if not for this year, potentially, as the Chair has mentioned, looking at a future scheme beyond March 2022. We are updating our pipeline of opportunities as we speak, and hopefully that will identify for us some of the immediate opportunity that we can still see for this year and into potentially next year. In terms of risks and issues, obviously the big issue and risk, as I've described just now, is really this funding situation and the provision of money from government. We still seem to have quite a bit of opportunity to do stuff if the funding is provided to us, and we can get on and support a large number of schemes across different geographies across our area. It's probably fair to say, and I've said in 218, that the programme has suffered some reputational damage as a result of some of the press and the uncertainty that's been created over the past, really more than a year and a half, that the issue with funding from MHCLG has been ongoing. That has not helped us. It continues to not help us, and the sooner we can get some clarity, the better, from my point of view. Looking ahead, maybe for the rest of this year and anything beyond March 2022, Homes England's new housing programme for 21-2026 has now closed in terms of bids, but there will be money that will be being made available to those bidders as part of that programme, and therefore there has to be just a question of would those bidders use that money on the new programme from Homes England before maybe coming to us in future for support on certain schemes and initiatives. So there is another source there, an established source of long-term funding. In terms of the financial position, I've mentioned some of it already. In terms of where we sit at the moment with our loan book, we're quite confident that our loan book is performing as we expected, and as the board were advised that the August 2020 COVID update that took place, where some of the schemes were, or the loans were extended and revised slightly. So we're confident generally about the loan book and the repayment of monies. In Appendix 3, there's quite a lot of information in some spreadsheets that was attached to the report. The key tab is probably the first tab on the left, which showed the cash flow for the programme that we have given to MHCLG. That cash flow shows the projected receipts from the 5 loans being set off against the payment of grants for the schemes, assuming we get the green light to get on with the schemes. So it's a sort of giant monthly cash flow. But again, it was something we had to provide to MHCLG so they could see and understand when we might need new money to deliver our programme. And we hope that that is something, as I say again, that they'll respond positively to. And I think I'm open to questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Councillor Allen, and then Councillor Batchelor, and then Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse my naivety, but I'm looking at 2B, and we have these 5 additional proposals. And the penultimate column states that the Ministry will not fund Rent Plus product, and yet we have 3 of the 4 schemes which are going down the line of Rent Plus. Could you perhaps give me some context about why it's on here if it's not going to be funded by the Ministry?
Yes, of course. It's really a case of batting order. We put our ask in to MHCLG with the Rent Plus schemes before they responded, advising that they didn't like the principle of the Rent Plus proposition, and therefore in the immediate short term it was going to be quicker for us to get decisions on the other schemes if they didn't report and seek to sort of progress the Rent Plus schemes at the moment. So it was part of our original ask, it was part of our original programme. We were hoping they would say yes to it, but they have flagged that that is a problem for them. So what we've sought to do is get the decisions that we can get hopefully quickly out of them, and then, as I said, come back to them with our schemes at the bottom of the schedule in Appendix 2, and hopefully have that sort of informed discussion, probably involving Rent Plus themselves, with MHCLG to seek to get their approval to those schemes, which are sitting there and ready to be supported.
So it's a no, not a no-no at this stage, is that right? Am I understanding you correctly? Go back and see if we support it?
Yes, I think we've tried to keep that door open with MHCLG to be able to go back and have that more detailed, probably more challenging discussion about that proposition. Yeah.
So I don't think the door's closed, but the strategy of communication to start with the ones that they're offering no direct resistance to.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Roger.
Councillor Batchelor?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I see of the allocations that we've made so far, we've only actually had a call down of 12.6 million. I mean, presumably a reflection of the slowness of developers, which we all have an issue with, particularly with planning, where we've all given the consent, but they don't actually get on with it. So one, is that the case here? The second question would be, since we've actually essentially earmarked all the money available, I know my office at Southampton are currently working on bringing forward some possible projects. Is there any purpose in the continue to do that. Obviously, we're keen to actually put up some projects, given that we only have 4% of the grant funding allocated so far. So perhaps if you could comment on that, please.
Thank you. So in connection with the first point of the cash flow and amount of money spent so far, that's not a specialist price, because we have 26.1 million committed in the grant programme, that schemes that started by March 2021, but not all the money is paid up front. In our grant agreements, typically the money is paid in 3 parts. So they get a sum when a scheme starts on site. There's frequently a sum at some sort of interim point, where maybe the development's halfway through, and then there's a final payment on the certification of completion of the development. So we have a cash flow of payments for a scheme, which means there's always a delay. And one of the things in the big cash flow in Appendix 3 is that although we have our cash flow for a programme that ends in theory in March 2022, that may involve a scheme that starts on site in March 2022 that takes 18 or 24 months to build, and therefore the final payment of the grant for that scheme might not be until, say, March 2024. So we've shown MHCLG this cash flow that has quite a long tail to it, because the payments tend to be lower than the physical build. And they have sort of understood that, I think, and realised that, okay, there's resources we'll need to retain, even if we do nothing more than having a programme that ends in March 2022. There's still quite a lot of work going on, monitoring the schemes that have been supported, making the payments with the finance team and with my officer team to ensure that everything's delivered appropriately. So I think that's the answer to your first question. Second question, if you've got new opportunities, yes, absolutely. We have a pipeline that we are still maintaining, that we are still seeking to welcome and identify new opportunities upon. There's 2 purposes for that. In case we can go back and make another ask of MHCLG between now and March 2022, because if we have more opportunities to deliver stuff in our area, why wouldn't we go and talk to them and say, you know, maybe if nothing happens with the Rent Plus schemes, hey, you know, there are other schemes that maybe on the timescale by March 2022 we can deliver, so I'd like to know about those in order to have the opportunity, if you think there's an opportunity, to present those to MHCLG. The second part of that equation is what happens after March 2022. And again, I think it helps us if we can see a pipeline of schemes and opportunities that might be delivered in 22, 23, that again, we might be able to go and talk to MHCLG and say, look, you know, sort of cutting us off and shutting us down. Actually, there's lots of opportunity here to still do stuff in our patch that we have visibility of, that maybe might not always find its way to Homes England. And we found in our programme for the last 3 or 4 years that actually we've sat quite comfortably alongside Homes England. I'm sure there are some schemes that we found that we've supported that if we didn't exist, maybe Homes England wouldn't have picked up and wouldn't have been supported directly.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, through you, first of all, thank Roger Thompson for, as usual, a very clear report on quite a complicated subject, and very grateful for that. I won't ask Mr. Thompson to speculate on what MHCLG may or may not do. We've discovered in the last year or two that can be a mug's game. One thing which I did find interesting in the report, which I didn't fully understand, was to do with the risks, and that is in paragraph 2.17 on page 36. That's the paragraph which begins, the CPCA programme faces pressure from providers' ability to seek funding from other sources, primarily Homes England. I seem to recall that something over a year ago, we had a scheme which we lost from our list because the provider found funding from elsewhere in order to proceed with it. And I wonder if it's being suggested here that providers may substitute our funding for Homes England funding for schemes which are either on our list or in our pipeline, or is it being suggested that providers may have a capacity issue, and by taking up funding for Homes England for other schemes, they may then not wish to proceed with our schemes?
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. I think it's both, actually. I think it's attached to both.
To what extent, if I may, Chair, to what extent should we be concerned if in one of our schemes, which provides affordable housing in our area, if the funding comes from Homes England rather than coming from us? Should we not actually welcome additional funding coming from Homes England, since that gives greater capacity for us to find funding for other schemes?
I mean, in the big picture, it's so long as the scheme is funded and therefore it gets built as quickly as it can in our area, then be transparent with you whether or not it's us supplying the funding or Homes England supplying the funding. I don't think that's a concern, especially. It's just so long as it's funded.
Okay. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Two points, if I may. First of all, I was very interested to read this point around MHCLG not being too keen on the Rent Plus model. That's the first I've heard of that, but I've had quite significant opposition to them myself within my own council as the housing portfolio holder. And I'm conscious we have previously supported this, I think, haven't we, Mr. Thompson, through you, Chairman? I seem to remember a scheme we did fund. And I think particularly with a change of direction, Chairman, I'd actually be interested, if I may, to know your views on the model and perhaps the new mayor, once he's had an opportunity to consider this sort of thing. Because, of course, I'm not averse to models that lead to home ownership, quite the opposite. But to me, this has always struck me as it's neither one nor the other, in that we seem to approve these schemes under affordable rent, that then we end up losing those homes, availability of them in perpetuity for people that need affordable rented or social rented homes. And that really sums up neatly my concerns around it. So I would be very interested in what MHCLG have to say on that particular point. And again, I'd always been led to believe by the Rent Plus people themselves that they did have backing for this type of model. So that's why it's so interesting. But I do think there should come a time when we as a combined authority actually make a stance on this. And that's why I say, Chairman, I'd be interested in your views, perhaps not now, I won't put you on the spot, but your views and those of the Mayor once you've had a chance to discuss these types of schemes, because it's about having the right scheme rather than necessarily just taking what's on offer at the moment in an effort to get the money allocated, get the numbers through. In fact, we're going to end up losing those homes in perpetuity anyway. It's not really what I thought we were trying to do with this particular fund. And the second point, it's a question, and it really follows on from what Councillor Bowden has said. It's the what next, because it's, I think it's great that we're allocating or hoping to allocate the entirety of the first 100 million and hit these targets and get the numbers out. But where do we then go next? Because I don't think there is an answer to that. And it goes very much to Councillor Bowden's point of, if we're really trying to compete with Homes England at the time and trying to quickly grant things before they do, they've got billions and billions and billions of pounds. We're going to run out of this, and I'm not sure there's any indication from government that we'll be getting a second tranche. So what happens then to our housing programme to have to get these houses allocated?
So I think I'll get in on this one, but if you want to add anything, Roger. I mean, I do think it would be useful if all of the committee members, including the new members, got a copy of the kind of letter that stated what the boundaries are. And the boundaries are pretty unkind in that the focus is on schemes we can effectively get shovels or concrete in the ground by March 22. That we first have to use any returning loan money, that we to get every single scheme approved by MHCLG. We're effectively representing some good schemes in the pipeline, but as Rogers Thompson's indicated, we want to kind of take a clean set of proposals to them as our first discussion. So ultimately, we are focusing on the schemes that have been approved and the 3 potential schemes subject to today. We would still want, and including in response to Councillor Batchelor's point, to bring forward a few more schemes, because, to use a phrase which is not used necessarily in the building trade, but it happens, some schemes fall over. So we don't want to just rely wholly on the list that's there, albeit that we can see that there's hundreds and hundreds of homes across the council which we would like to get. So we're going to we do need to engage directly with the civil servants. They are fully entitled to different priorities and rules to Homes England, and Rent Plus is one of those zones. But we are giving up on those Rent Plus or the Halo schemes that are proposed. My personal take is every scheme that's been approved and worked on by officers, and every scheme that's been approved by this committee should be put in front of MHCLG, and we'll fight for the money. And we're still underneath the total money that we could get. We could loan money with the grant that's out that's still due. And so there's still a bit of headroom even then. Roger will say that we're probably up at the limit, but then if a couple of schemes don't proceed, then all of a sudden we've got some headroom. So I think there's a lot of really good schemes in here, and I don't think there's one of them I wouldn't defend, and we will take up the Rent Plus debate, but that'll be, if you like, a second discussion. I mean, we've got to basically get underneath the skin of some of the willingness to help us get value for money, and on certain exceptions to enable the deadline to be stretched, because the building trade doesn't work to March the 31st, and there's a number of these projects which have been subject to significant delay, and along with the patience that Roger and the team have shown, there's a lot of people that have had to reschedule and change all of their plans, and not just once. So pragmatism, getting best value, helping the most families in the county, and politically it would help if we could talk through the leaders of the different districts, and that includes Peterborough, Huntingdon and Fenland, as well as David and the East Cambridgeshire MP, and get the backing of the MPs as well. I'm not in any way denying the role of the civil servants, because they are looking after public money, but I do think that we've got to have a bit of a lobby here, because if I just look at that list of homes in Fenland and in Peterborough, they're ones we want, and the civil servants are rightly very concerned about process, the ethics of how we've operated, issues about getting best value, but we've just got to try and say, look, we are going to do our best for this community in line with the agreement with government, and we do need some flex, we do need some help from government. So if we can get Steve Barclay, and we can get Jonathan Ginogly and Mr. Briscoe to support us, then I think that will help. So yeah,
just one.
You two had a more sanguine, reflective point.
Just one thing to add. In the paper to the Minister, we did ask MHCLG to put provisioning to enable us to substitute schemes. So if we had a failed scheme that didn't progress, we could replace that with another scheme. Obviously, it has to be represented through Housing Committee here, but it wouldn't have to go back to MHCLG if it was within whatever funding they may approve, if it was still within that envelope. So we've asked them for the ability to substitute in the event that one or two schemes do drop off, and we can still make decisions ourselves.
So I want MHCLG to recognise the professionalism of the Combined Authorities team and the quality of the schemes, and we will go in a bit like the cricketing analogy that you used before. We'll go into bat and see how much that we can get progress on. There's obviously an iterative dialogue with the existing schemes, and yeah, I think there's going back to have people got the choice. Obviously, some people have made a choice and gone to Homes England, but all of the schemes that are here are potentially deliverable. So we will seek to land them. Any other questions? So we will give an update, and Roger did ask for some feedback last week, but we want to get what's the Minister's view, and then have a dialogue on some of the detail. And we've got the meeting in September, but we would hope to be able to update members of the committee in the interim. absence of any other questions, if I could move to the recommendations, or one recommendation. Proposal and seconder for the recommendation that we approve the proposals. We recommend to the board that we approve the proposals for the affordable housing programme being discussed with MXCLG, and we go back on the Rent Plus. Proposed by Councillor Bowen and seconded by David Roseworth. Can I have those in favour, please? Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for all the work that you've been putting into your team. So we then move on to 3 items, and I know that there's been some really healthy exchanges led by members of the committee. So some of the existing members of the committee will have developed something of a way of investigating these 3 schemes. I hope that in looking at the 3, we can be, whilst they're very different schemes, that we can be consistent, and thereby that we've got a view that we can actually just fathom first the detail of them, and then make a judgment about whether to support them. So if we move on to item 2.3, we've got the proposal at Fairbarn Way, Chatteris, and for the benefit of technology, we will see if we can engage Asma Ahmed Pierce through the ether. So Asma's going to introduce the report. So whilst we're reaching her, there's clearly quite a large amount on each of these reports of exempt appendices. So the appendices to the report are exempt from publication because they contain information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular people, including authorities. If people do want to discuss content, we're quite happy to go into private session because the material is subject to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. If you want to just talk about the principles, then obviously we would prefer to be able to have an open dialogue and for it to be screened. But if at any stage you do want to go into detail, if you could effectively raise that. Are people happy with that approach, that we seek to discuss it in the open, but if there is a specific point, we may need to come to that. Hello, Asma.
Hello.
We can see you full screen.
Oh, God.
Last time we didn't even get we didn't get the name of the person that we were speaking to. So,
no, that was correct. I was watching
to St.
Can you all hear me?
We certainly can. It's like you've got some celestial being that it's coming across in full volume. Thank you.
Good, good.
So, Fairbarn Way, Chatteris.
Right, I can only see me. I cannot see anybody. So forgive me. I'm not focusing anywhere in particular. Right.
I know you just got to believe that we can see you. Okay.
That's fine. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back after the elections and everything. I hope everybody's good and well. Welcome to all the new members as well. Unfortunately, I can't be with you today, but shortly, if things happen and restrictions will ease, I will be there. I will start off with Fairbarn Way in Chatteris. It's a site in the Fens. It's got 50 units that they're proposing to build. 41 are affordable rented properties and 9 are shared ownership homes. They're ranging from a 2-bed to a 4-bed in the affordable rent categories and 2-bed to 3-bed shared ownerships. We've got affordable funding homes going to planning for reserved matters in the next few weeks. They're hoping to get a decision by September 21. They will acquire the land in November 21 with a start on site in January 2022. They're requesting a grant of over 2,082,000. They are going to be using 42 million on the rented properties, sorry, 42K on the rented properties and 40k on the shared ownerships. The site is 100% affordable housing site, so all the units on there are affordable. There are no other forms of housing on there. It is a greenfield site of low agricultural, so therefore they consider it a windfall site. The site is being constructed to produce modern, sustainable and energy efficient homes for people in the local area. We're expecting completion in January 2024. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Bowden, it's your patch.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Yes, it is indeed my patch, and affordable housing is very much needed in the Chatteris area. And in fact, strategically, Chatteris does need to grow in order to be able to thrive as a town. However, whilst you're quite correct, Chair, to say that some returning members have explored these subjects quite thoroughly in the past, we have a number of new members of the committee as well. And I wonder if it might be helpful for Mr. Thompson just to explain that the housing market in Fenland is rather different from the housing market and the housing problems which exist in the south of the county. We have a problem of affordability, and that problem of affordability is that we cannot manage to get much, if any, Section 106 or affordable housing provision out of the building out and granting planning permission for residential development on private land and private homes. The economics of the area just doesn't sustain it. So we are desperately dependent upon schemes such as this to be able to provide us with the much needed affordable housing that we've got. But the fact that we do have new members on the committee, I wonder either if Mr. Thompson would care to say something now, or if it might be appropriate to give an explanation at a future meeting to explain how different the problems are, how different, just for 1 second, Chair, that there are no challenges in the south of the county. But the nature of the challenges isn't just different, it's almost 180 degrees different.
Mr. Thompson. I'm happy just to give a quick commentary on that and actually possibly issue an invitation as well to the members, especially the new members. So yes, across our area, geographically, we have, as Councillor Bowden has indicated, a wildly sort of varying housing market. We have a real hotspot and very high levels of value around Cambridge and generally South Cambridgeshire. And then as you start to move, particularly north across our area and head up towards Fenland, the challenges become different. And when you're looking at the viability of these different schemes, the different dynamics come into play. What I did back in January when this sort of discussion came up, I had a sort of information, I wouldn't call it training, but it was an information session for members around viability and how development appraisals work, and to get some understanding of how some of the different metrics in different sort of areas impact. I'll be very happy, Chair, to issue an invite to repeat that for new members of the committee and anyone else, to be frank, who wants to dip in. Previously, we had some of the housing officers from some of the councils dip in. I'm very happy to do that again with a different audience. But Councillor Bowden's correct, there are different challenges in different geographies, very different markets, and certainly we found affordable housing in Fenland to be challenging, and to have got a good scheme in Fenland. We were very pleased to capture this one.
Okay, thank you for that. It is a very different economy. So, any further questions? Councillor Batchelor.
Well, I'd just like to agree. I'd find that very helpful, and in particular, I'd like to know more specifically what the criteria is for judging the additionality, because in all of these ones, I'm having difficulty actually seeing that. But can I just continue on this specific proposal? One, I think it's a little
Can you speak up a little bit, Councillor Batchelor?
Can I move that a bit closer?
I've got
Does
my
that
hearing
actually
aid in and I
improve?
can still not hear properly.
I'm in this position.
I'm feeling I'm not getting my money's worth. Carry on.
Okay, it's a little disappointing. I think that it's not meeting the national space standards, particularly for the 3-bed, 4-bed, is it, or 3-bed proposal, where it's only 88%. I would have thought part of the criteria should be that the absolute minimum of anything that we might fund should at least meet the national space standards. I was also wanting to comment on the financial outturns. I'm not sure if that's something I can do
You
in
could
the
only
open
really
meeting.
comment on it in general terms, unless you want to come. We could collect a couple of issues and come back after we ask questions in the open.
Right. I'd just like to understand the additionality element and how that reflects on the developer's profit level.
So the overall additionality in terms of the outturn.
Yeah. Thank you.
Could I just ask a question, if we're going back to asthma, also about exactly what form of affordability there is in the rent? If you could add a bit more on that, if you're there, Asma.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. Just get the right paper.
Are there? We're not getting your sound, Asma.
Sorry, are you not able to hear me?
You can hear us, I think, but we can't hear you at the moment.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. I can't see anybody.
We can
but...
hear you now.
Ah, okay. Sorry,
If
could you just
get that privilege, I'm afraid.
I can't run away that quickly, can I? I just wanted to know, the additionality is 50 additionality homes to the area. That's the overall amount of additionality. There are no market housing. It's all affordable. So the additionality is 50 homes, which goes towards our 2000 targets. In regards to the rented properties, they are affordable rents. They are LHA capped rents. I've checked that this afternoon within the Fenlands District Council remit.
And then Councillor Batchelor's space standards question.
Yes, that is something that obviously has to be directed to the planning department. Space standards are not mandatory, they're optional. So if they're in your local plan, in most cases, they will follow space standards, but I don't think they are in the Fenlands local plan. And I believe that is being updated as we speak. But we've ensured that all properties are over 85% of NGSS standards. Anything lower than that, we would not accept it.
Okay, Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the requirements for size as against the nationally described space standards is different in different parts of the combined authority area. And we've had this discussion a few times within the Housing Committee. And basically, we are a combined authority, that is, an authority made up of a number of separate authorities. And we had come to the conclusion previously that so long as that 85% rule is covered, then each individual local authority's right to determine its own minimum sizes should be respected. And I can confirm that this would conform with the requirements within Fenland. We'd like larger sizes, but if we have larger sizes, we have fewer homes. And we're in a situation where, with all due respect, beggars can't be choosers. We have a really serious problem as far as affordable housing is concerned in Finland.
And this is land zoned for housing, Councillor Bowden?
Now, if you our previous local plan, to be quite honest, it's so far back that I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if it is or not. I'm totally concentrating on the draft new local plan coming forward, and I must admit I didn't bother looking this up on the old one.
Because I mean, my understanding is that they're zoned for residential, so it's then subject to what was, I think Asma said, reserved matters application.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions people want to ask about this scheme? So, yes, it is meeting a significant affordable housing need in a market town and Chatteris. There are several stages that people need to get through before the money will be payable, but there's a clear plan and it's a well put together proposition. So I'm going to put this scheme to the vote. Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Bowden again, and a seconder, Councillor Ambrose Smith. So if we look at the recommendations on page 53, we're being recommended to commit grant funding of 2.082 million to enable the delivery of 50 affordable homes, 41 for LHA level rent and 9 shared ownership. And it's subject to confirmation along with the other proposals from MHCLT. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendation?
Sorry, Chairman, if I could just, could we just establish, when we say affordable rent, I assume this is 80% of market rates.
I think the LHA,
it is set a, sorry, beg your pardon, yes, it is 80% or lower.
80% or lower, but it varies a little within the county because the relative rent to the fixed local housing allowance is different in Fenland than, say, in parts of South Cambridgeshire.
So we'll try not to exceed, we'll try not to exceed the local housing allowance rates.
So we've got a commitment to at least being 80% or lower, and but the actual final number will be obviously pushed to what we can achieve, but not anything fixed. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Batchelor. So I was moving to the vote. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. So if we can move on, Asma, to 2.4, which is 2.3, which is the scheme in Girton. Asma, if you could introduce the scheme, which is Dovehouse Court, which is the Girton Almshouses project.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Dovehouse Court, 14 to 16 High Street, Girton, in the South Cambridgeshire borough. It's 15 affordable rented units. They have a weekly maintenance allowance, which is in line with the affordable rents of the area. There are 10 one-bedroom apartments, 10 bungalows, 5 bungalows, beg your pardon. There are almshouses, and they are for the 55 plus people of that age group in the area. They're requesting a grant of 675,000. Each unit is 45k. It's led by a community-led housing project, and we are looking to support it. They are due to start imminently in late July, early August. They have planning permission. The additionality is 15 units.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for that very concise and informative opening. Any questions on this scheme? I can back them.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wasn't at all clear what the additionality we're actually funding here is. As has just been said, this does have planning permission, and I'm very familiar with this as I was chairman of the Plan Committee that gave this permission, at which time they didn't seem to feel that they will be needing further funding. So I'm not clear what the 675,000 is actually being paid for. This doesn't appear to say anything other than the fact that we're getting affordable housing. We would have got affordable housing anyway, as far as I could see. But there we are.
Asma, could you give us a bit more? I know that there's been significant negotiations about how much was needed, and I expect that involved us looking very closely at their balance sheets, Asma?
Yes, that's correct. We had a conversation with them. They went to Homes England initially, and Homes England asked them to be an RP to help funding with the project. However, then they got in contact with my colleague, Emily Mulvaney, and myself to see whether there was any aspect of funding through our remit, because Homes England did point them in our direction as still having funding available. So we spoke to them at great length. As they are a charity, and we've already dealt with charities and another community-led housing project previously, we discussed the situation in whether we were able to assist them and how that would happen. So we were in quite a lot of conversations with it. They required some money to assist with the funding of those units.
So I believe that there is a need for funding, Councillor Batchelor.
Well, I'm prepared to accept that, and it's jolly good that at least a couple of bobs coming to South Cambs area.
Well, we're trying to help you, Councillor Batchelor.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this project?
Yeah.
No? Sorry, Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. The affordable accommodation is for the 55 plus age group. Is there any other criteria?
No,
Are there any other criteria, Asma, in terms of
Connections and so forth?
Yes.
There is a criteria, but that is run by the charity.
So do you know any more detail about any geographic base in that criteria?
They were saying that they were looking to local people. Sorry, there was a bit of interference there. They were looking to get local people and helping with the downsizing in the area.
Okay. Councillor Batchelor, do you want to add something?
It is a local charity which actually restricts the actual tenancies to local people.
Okay. Councillor Ambrose?
Arms houses normally do, but it's not in these papers.
Yeah. Okay. So it is for a different type of affordability need and wider benefits in terms of potentially unlocking housing as well. So if people are happy, I'll move to the recommendations. Do I have a proposer?
Yeah.
I've got proposer, Councillor Batchelor, and a seconder from Councillor Ambrose Smith. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendation on page 59? Again, we've got a happy unanimity. Thank you. So we then move on to a large scheme, the third of the three schemes, Asma. So if you could help us by introducing 2.4, Asma. Sorry, 2.33 I meant. And that's the Northminster Peterborough scheme.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, right. So Northminster in Peterborough. Right. This is a site that's been included in the Peterborough City Council local plan. It is a brownfield site and it's in the city centre. It's in an area which needs mass regeneration, and the support from that regeneration has come from the PIP, which is the Peterborough Investment Partnership. They're looking to provide a build to rent scheme of 352 homes. These homes are ranging from houses to masonettes to flats in the area. The site is owned by Peterborough Council, I believe, and partly owned by PIP. I am aware at the moment that Northminster is going through a consultation at the moment, is due to end in the next few days. And the PIP has been in contact with the planning department to ensure that it gets full planning assistance. So it's had a pre-app as well. Planning is due to be submitted on the 9th of July. and is to be undertaken by a PPA, which is a planning performance agreement. This means that the planning has to be conducted in a timely manner of 13 weeks. All the units, I believe, are of NDSS standards, and all the rents will be in affordable private rent levels. So they'll be at 80% or lower of the current local market rents. They will be ideal for key workers and young professionals. Unfortunately, people who are on the housing waiting list will not be able to afford them because they will be a little bit over the LHA rates. But they are classed as a sub-market rent level product and will meet a market demand within the Peterborough area, which will provide a bit more security with longer tenancy agreements. They will last the tenancy agreements from 1 to 3 or even 5 years, a possibility. The grant requested is over 14 million, 31,750. The grant per unit is 39,750K per unit. As at the moment, certain parts of the site have been demolished. The car park, multi-story car park has gone. And they are looking to try and find out within the consultation what to do with the market, which is also there at the moment. It's a mixed site and it is on a brownfield site, so it will be well looked upon as a regeneration site of a big nature in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the scheme? Starting with Councillor Ambrose Smith and then Councillor Batchelor.
Hello, Asma. Could you please, through the chair, define a masonette and a flat against a flat? What's the difference, please?
Yeah.
So the difference between maisonettes and flats, if we walk through the list of different types on page 64, Asma.
I'm of the understanding that the flats are on one floor, masonettes can be on a second floor. So there's a duplex type version. So you've got a ground floor with the facilities and bedrooms upstairs. That's a masonette within a blocked arrangement.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I didn't know that. Thank you.
I built them, so I know them.
Again, the heating.
What, built them personally, Asma?
I have, yes. Built them personally. I was a development manager at a previous address and I built masonettes in one of my projects.
Right, okay. So if you want to know more, you can ring her up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I much appreciate
Definitely.
It's very good. Thank you. The previous project was a very well put together project. The type of building was very much up to date, passive house design. Here we're talking gas boilers or gas heating boilers. Is this up to date? Do you think it's the right thing to be doing with this number of houses?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Gas boilers, what's our view about the fact that they're proposing individual gas boilers here?
I would have to ask about that. As I am aware, gas boilers are being phased out. So I wouldn't see the purpose of putting gas boilers into new units if we're supposed to be going carbon zero. I'd have to check on that. I'm not aware that they were doing gas boilers. They were making me aware that they were going to be quite energy efficient homes, but I wasn't aware that there were going to be gas boilers. I'd have to check upon that. Sorry, I'd have to come back to you with that.
It's in the report. I can't tell you where it is, but I've read that.
What, in the
not just
para 11 on environmental stuff, or in?
I can't remember where I read it. I've read it. Yeah, read it all. But that's interesting, not just for this particular project, but the projects going forward, Chair. The environment.
Yeah.
Gas boilers.
So, that might be in the exempt documents.
It would be good to.
It may well be.
Yeah. So it would be good to come back. I do think we should add a rider that we would be looking for, particularly as it's a intense building where literally one flat heats another and so on, that its need for gas is likely to be far less than say a row of houses.
I completely agree with you. I wasn't aware that there was going to be gas, so I will check that out.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, we would like that checked. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it sounds to say at this moment in time, that's not part of our criteria for funding decisions, is it? And,
I'm not going to do it. Wouldn't put me off.
I say that having attended the climate discussions this morning of the Combined Authority, whereas, you know, Chairman, a paper will be coming forward to the board that may indeed make that part of our future deliberations. But at this moment in time, you know, it's an excellent point, but I'm not sure we can particularly take it into account. It's probably for the City Council and the developers to sort that out amongst themselves. I would just say on this scheme, though, what an excellent proposal it is. You know, I really like to see these regeneration schemes. It's a very innovative funding model and an ownership model, and you know, I congratulate the City Council on bringing this forward.
Councillor Bowden, yeah, I note that and agree with you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I very much agree with the comments made by Councillor Fuller. I am aware of the site, and I know that this sort of development on that site will have a significant effect on the city centre and a significant positive effect on the city centre. So I very much welcome it from that point of view. But I also particularly welcome the fact that we're having a variety of tenures and of costs involved as far as housing is concerned. This one being aimed towards young professionals, key workers and low income earners. And I very much welcome the fact that we don't have uniformity across all of the applications that we see in front of us, but we recognise that there are different pressures at different levels of the market, and this one attacks one of those levels, and I'm very grateful to see the variety.
No, I reiterate that comment. Councillor Allen, I'm sure you will come in with some local information.
Thank you. It is a good scheme. That area of Peterborough city centre badly needs that scheme. The fact that it's affordable rent is perfect for the location, encouraging the right kind of tenant for that kind of location. And there is a bit of pushback on the gas boiler, because my understanding is that the development has all electric heating. So I have got the exempt document in front of me. I can't access it because it's a new computer, but I don't think that that is correct. That does need checking out. So I would encourage it's right for the site, and the City Council are very much behind it.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Batchelor.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to have a slightly different note. I've got quite a number of concerns about this proposal. If we start off with the tenancies, obviously it's disappointing that no one from the housing list will be entertained for this. But there, as far as I can see, there's actually no criteria for selecting those who will be tenants. And given the large number of apartments here, I'm sure the developer's main interest will be simply to fill them. So the question there is, why will we be subsidizing people who quite possibly, because we haven't actually tested in any way, could easily afford a commercial rent? So should we be subsidizing that? Then I've got concerns about how the additionality has been arrived at. The additionality appears to be based on the full 353 apartments. If my reading of the papers was correct, that there was an option, or is an option, for this to be a commercial, purely commercial operation with 30% affordable housing being possible and viable within the costs. That would have produced 116 affordable houses. So if we're looking at additionality in my mind, we would need to take off that 116 from the 353, because that's what we are getting in addition. So we're getting in addition 237 units. That would mean that we're actually investing £59,202 in each one of these on average. My understanding is that the cap is at 45, so I'd like to know how that works. I have a couple of other issues on technical matters. The land valuation appears to be based on a completely different sort of project. One has to wonder if the number they're coming with there is actually correct. I'd also say, without talking about the numbers, that the rent income adjusted by a factor of 25% to actually allow, supposedly, for voids and unrecoverable service charges. Any management company worth its salt wouldn't expect that to be higher than 5%. So I wonder if that is effective. I quite understand the key is to regenerate the area, but this is not a regeneration fund, and I don't think we should judge it on that basis. So I'm afraid I would find great difficulty actually in supporting this, because I can't see that it actually meets the requirements that we have available. Thank you, Chair.
Asma, could you give us some response on the points, the sort of questions that are in Councillor Batchelor's contribution? So we've got here the 353 homes at 80%. Is there anything that you can add on whether there's an allocation methodology, and perhaps Councillor Allen, you might want to add anything at the end if there's anything that you could add to. But is there, obviously, as Councillor Bowden said, got very different housing economics, but what's our view when we've reviewed the affordable approach on this project? Are there specific policies in Peterborough's local plan about affordable percentages? And then Councillor Batchelor also asked about the route to value the land, and also the factor that was built into the financial model for voids and other aspects. I don't know if you've got anything you can add. We've got quite a lot of information in the reports, but could you seek to answer those points, Asma?
I'll try my best. My understanding is when we spoke to the PIP, they were looking at several projects. They looked at different models as well, and they settled on this one of the 353. I know that Peterborough has 30% of the affordable housing threshold. As all the units are going to be affordable, that was considered fine. I had a response from the housing enabling officers supporting it. However, it is sub-market rents for the area, and it's going to lead with market demand. So there was that issue there. We took upon ourselves to make that decision. We did discuss at great lengths the due diligence with the PIP. They were able to come down to 39k per unit within the MAHCLG's amount threshold that they wanted. I don't want to go into too many financial details on stream at the moment, because I would have to look at that. I haven't got the papers in front of me to go into looking at the financials, if that's all right. Otherwise I'll be misleading. But like I said, I did speak to various people in and around Peterborough about the project. One of them was the housing enabling officer. We did discuss it at great length. I've spoken to the PIP on various occasions, and they felt that they could have used different models and put market housing on there to help subsidize the site, such as Flitton Quays, but they decided to go for very much a build to rent affordable site. So that's what they plumped for, and that's what they presented to me. So the additionality is the full amount of 353 units with no market.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy that this is good use of the combined authorities' resources, and whilst it's got its target, I'm with Councillor Bowden in terms of the fact that it can make a significant assistance, and it does make rental in the centre of Peterborough more affordable. Did we as a combined authority ask anything of PIP and the future management structure in terms of how they would be allocated in terms of relative need, or is it effectively that there's going to be a rapid build and they're just going to be available to people who apply? Is there a process for allocating them, Asma?
All I was aware is that they were hoping to assist with market-led demands within the market there in Peterborough. I didn't go too much into the issues of lettings and things like that, but I'm assuming that from what the PIP were looking at, they were looking at young professionals and key workers in that area mainly. So there may be some form of local letting plan that might come about.
So we'd be interested, I think, just as a matter of understanding what their local lettings policy is. Councillor Fuller.
Yep.
Yes, Chairman, I'm afraid I couldn't disagree with Councillor Batcher anymore if I tried. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here around the housing role of a housing authority. It's not just to funnel people through a housing waiting list onto social housing. You know, any decent housing authority is actually looking at the mix of housing within its area. Now, that's what Peterborough is clearly doing here. It's realised that there is a significant gap, perhaps, for this type of offer, and it's trying to pitch to it. We mustn't fall into the trap of believing that everyone on the housing waiting list is very poor and cannot afford things. You know, we know there are no financial barriers to being accepted onto a waiting list. One could be a millionaire and apply for social housing. Now, it's unlikely, but it is technically possible. And I suspect what Peterborough will do, I haven't spoken to council, will probably do, is they will take a look at their housing list when this development gets underway, and they may well suggest to some of the people on there who could well actually afford these rents that this might be an alternative route into getting a secure tenancy. And that's, again, we know that's one of the reasons lots of people do apply to the social housing list. It's not necessarily because they can't afford market properties or market rent, it's that they quite like the security of tenancy that social housing provides. And what I see here is actually a city council and a development partnership saying, we're going to give longer tenancies. You know, we're going to do these things because we're going to be a better landlord. It's something we've looked at in my council in the past. I mean, we're not a stock-owning council, so you know, we don't have these development partnerships, so we're not quite at that stage. But there is a very significant role, often, to step in and help push the market, shall we say, rather than shape the market, but push the market in the right direction and actually offer better alternatives and options for people. I reiterate my point earlier. This seems to me to be an excellent scheme. It's perfectly well targeted, I think, at a very significant gap in the market. And if only each of our councils were bringing these sort of schemes forward, particularly, again, on the regeneration site. We must remember that point. It's all well and good talking around policy compliant affordable housing levels, but there's nothing to guarantee that on a regeneration site, you would be able to deliver through viability policy compliant affordable housing in the first place. So I'm sorry, through you, Chair, to Councillor Batcher, it's not a simple calculation as this is what we've got, this is what we're getting, and therefore it's not actually this level of additionality.
Okay. Any further comments?
Well, if I could just make, Chair, I don't disagree with anything you said there. The question that we've got before us is, does this actually fit the criteria for actually the fund that we're managing? And in my view, the case hasn't been made. You know, great project, no doubt, but that's not what we're judging here. We're judging whether this money we actually, my understanding, underlying everything is to improve affordability. I'm not sure that it actually meets that.
Okay, you're entitled to your view. Councillor Bowden.
Just to assist Councillor Batchelor, my understanding is, and others might correct me, my understanding is that by the rent being fixed at a maximum of 80% of market value, it comes into the technical definition of affordable housing so far as our authority is concerned.
That's the route. Does Councillor Allen, do you want to add anything?
There's not much I can add to what has bounced across the room. There's clearly a different opinion on it, and I support Councillor Fuller and Councillor Bowden with their interpretation. We have funds to allocate to affordable housing. This is affordable rent. It's a perfect scheme for the location, and I urge people to support it because we have other schemes in the city which are catering for other demands. We're looking at this in isolation for its location.
Okay. The only outstanding issue I have, and it won't change my view, but is the fact that this is a very large scheme. Do we have any further information on the deliverability of this? Because on an intervention of £14 million, that's a very large, if justified, percentage of our funding. Will it start in time so that if we get MHCLG approval, we know that £14 million will be spent?
The only thing that I see hampering would be the movement of the market, and that is not an issue that I see coming up on the horizon. The traders are being moved out. There's vacant possession on the former car park. I see no reason why we cannot proceed with this.
Okay. And what's your inquiries, Asma? Do you have any view on, subject to what Councillor Allen said, the ability to get the not just shovels but very large equipment in the ground before the deadline? Asma?
I've had great conversations with PIP. They are very, very forward thinking. They are trying to move milestones as fast as they possibly can. They're looking at getting that planning application in by the 9th of July. They have done a PPA, so they want it done in a timely manner. I've never seen a planning application since I've left Three Rivers done in 13 weeks. So this is something that Peterborough's got to try and beat. And then they're looking to sort of acquire the land, do the tenders during the autumn and get on site by the start of the new year. I think it's possible. I think it's going to be a great scheme. They have looked at other other people within the population of Peterborough that needs housing. I think it's a great scheme. And why are we just looking at the niche people of just people on the housing register? Because it's not just them that require housing. People who can and earn a bit more but can't afford market rents will be able to access this kind of housing. It's something that Peterborough desperately needs. I think it's going to be a great project. It's going to take quite a lot to build. They are looking at 2 to 3 years. It's 353 units. And we will be in touch with the PIP throughout the whole project.
Okay, thank you. Enthusiasm there. Mr. Thompson, you might have the last word on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something, Chair, just about the motivation. If committee is minded to approve this £14 million grant, that is incredibly motivating for the PIP, knowing full well that if they don't start on site by March 2022, that 14 million will not exist for their support for their scheme. It's amazing sometimes how that sort of thing can focus minds and get things moving when otherwise people might spend much longer. Okay. Observation.
Yes, it's a large proportion of the funding of the project. I also, whilst I'm not going to give any latitude to projects who set these deadlines and they can be delivered, it is an example of a scheme that, should there be a 1 month or 6 week delay, it's a good example of a scheme that we would, I believe, take to government and say, we really do need this. So I take your point, Councillor Batchelor, that it isn't affordable housing in the sense of what we perhaps get in the south of the county, but I think in Cambridge and as well as in Peterborough that we would look very favourably on a scheme like this, because we do have particular issues for younger people as well. So it's in the traditional housing needs register, there's a lot of people who would end up sharing flats or maisonettes here or townhouses who do need that accommodation, and it is a stepping stone, I think, as Councillor Fuller said, because a lot of people can't actually together rent a house in some of these environments. So I'm going to take the issue to the vote and seek a proposer and a seconder. So I've got a proposer from Councillor Allen and a seconder from Councillor Fuller. Can I see all those in favour? And against? Abstentions? An abstention from Councillor Batchelor. So that's been approved, and thank you for ASMA for all the work that you put into these schemes and to others. That takes us on to the next item, being the Revel Acres Cooperative, and an introduction by Emily Mulvaney, if we are connected on item 2.4. We may take a minute just to swap speakers. I presume people are happy to just work to a conclusion of this meeting.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can indeed, Emily. Welcome.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
So if you could introduce the... Hi. We can see you, but you won't be able to see us.
Okay.
So if you could introduce the proposal for the startup grant to Revel Acres Cooperative, please.
Yeah, of course. So Revel Acres Cooperative are a new community-led housing group that we are working with. They're actually the first community-led housing group we're working with in the Peterborough area. They have applied for a startup grant of £5,000 in order to help them set themselves up as a legally incorporated group and start to do some initial business planning, looking for land, things like that, in order to work towards a small carbon neutral, eco-friendly project of around 10 homes. Their project will be based on permaculture principles, so based on sustainability and self-sufficiency. And they are committed to providing homes of varying tenure, including affordable housing, so that the eco-friendly vision is accessible to all. As part of their project, they're also ultimately seeking to provide some facilities and employment opportunities for the wider community. So they're envisaging things like gardening workshops, music workshops, upskilling and volunteering opportunities, and open green space available for the wider community. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Emily. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, we have had quite a number of applications for startup grants of this form, which we've, I think, always agreed to. But previously, every single application we've dealt with has intended to have the build take place within the area of the combined authority. In this case, we're told that they may choose to go to Lincolnshire or to Northamptonshire, so long as it's a village within 30 minutes of Peterborough. Is to propose to require any build which is going to take place and any support which we give to be within the combined authority area.
Can you answer that one, Emily?
Yeah, so at the moment I can confirm that the group are in discussion with the housing and planning teams within Peterborough, and they are specifically looking for land within the Peterborough City Council area. Whether you wanted to put some kind of requirement for them to develop within the Peterborough City Council area, I will leave that to you.
Okay, so
On that, I would very much welcome the opportunity, not within the Peterborough area, but within the combined authority area.
well, if we can assist that, I mean, I think I look at the list on page 78, and are these, Emily, the 15 there, are they Peterborough residents?
At the moment, they all are either Peterborough residents or have strong local connections to the Peterborough area via work.
Okay, so we can. So I guess my take, Councillor Bowden, would be we could certainly encourage them to set up, but this is definitely going to be a question of finding the appropriate land, which is going to be able to get planning. So I don't think they'd find that land near Cambridge, but maybe within the Peterborough sort of travel to work area, then I think they should be able to.
The trouble is, Chair, that quite a bit of the Peterborough travel to work area is within the combined authority area.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm in approving it on the basis that it's helping people meet their housing needs, but obviously, if they came back for any further assistance, then we may have that discussion in more detail. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, this is quite a strange one, Chairman, isn't it? Or it's different, shall I say, in respect to all the others we've seen, in that usually these are led by communities, so, you know, geographical areas, who are coming up with solutions to try and meet the housing needs of people within that existing community. And what we seem to have here is 9 families who are looking to build 9 homes for themselves in a location yet to be determined. And it's an absolutely fine aspiration. You know, everything they talk about around the ecological reasons and the community reasons and so on are to be admired. I'm just not convinced, or I haven't yet been convinced. I hear what others have got to say, but I'm just not convinced that taxpayers' money should be being used to help deliver this aspiration, because this doesn't benefit, that I can see, the wider community necessarily. It's not going to provide opportunity for others to get involved. It's almost a closed shop in a sense here, isn't it? It's, you know, a group of people that want to solve their housing aspirations for themselves, and that's it.
So, I mean, so where I come from on looking at it is that it's a contribution of about 500, 550 per family. So it's an issue about whether we are supporting what's as much a co-housing scheme, or at least the exploration of it. I know from the work that we put in over about 8 years in the city to help a co-housing scheme, how challenging some of those can be, and even getting to a point where you've got a group of people who share the same objectives. And so I personally support this. I think it's good use of public money if it helps people find a route. Councillor Allen.
I would support the proposal that we caveat any funding to a location within the combined authority. I think it's a laudable aspiration, and it's a great plan set out, but we must contain it to the boundaries of our combined authority.
Okay. Thank you. Emily, could you comment on that? Because, I mean, I think we do want evidence that we're getting benefit to the combined authority area, or we're addressing housing issues in our area.
Yeah, absolutely. That shouldn't be a problem. We can caveat it as such within the grant agreement. Also, just to touch on the slightly different nature of this scheme, it is a cooperative and somewhat of a co-housing group, but the group very much see themselves as being open and wanting to work with the community and welcome people from the Peterborough community into the group, even if it's not residentially, it might be in other ways, and they are committed to including some affordable housing, which will be dealt with in line with a similar allocations policy to traditional affordable housing. So it will have that element of providing for those in housing need as well.
Okay, so the proposal would be that in the recommendation that we approve the award subject to them seeking a location within the combined authority area. Are people happy with that as an amendment? Yeah. I just, as I read through and I hadn't seen it, that I actually have worked with one of the people there because I did work with Peterborough Environment City, and one of the people there was quite, I can't remember the name of the charity, but Ian Tennant I did work with, just so that I haven't got any personal links with him, but I know that person. So I'm going to move that, I'm going to seek a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation as amended. Is that clear enough, the wording there? A mover, Councillor Allen, and a seconder, Councillor Bowden, or, sorry. So I'll try and swivel better at the next meeting. All those in favour of the application? Against? Abstention? An abstention from Councillor Fuller. Okay. Well, I thank you all for your contributions, and I thank the housing team for all the work that they've put in. We've got a big job to talk to MHCLG and get a response, including because the clock is ticking. So if MHCLG is watching the movie, we do need your assistance to get on with this. We are committed to delivering affordable housing, and you've seen some excellent projects today. So we do seek that discussion and the response from ministers. As I said, I do think working with the local authorities should involve some of our local MPs in support of some of these projects, and then make progress so that we can update as the committee ahead of our meeting, which is the 9th of September. And I do thank our audience team for beaming people in from wherever they are. And so I thank Emily and Asma and also Noel. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your attendance.
Perhaps, Chair, now the meeting's finished, you can do something about